Thanks, everyone. Welcome to ACDC. This is call number 161. It is issue 1614 in the consensus, the PM repo. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we'll cover Fusaka, some Amsterdam things, and then there was a spec question that we can get to at the end of the call. So first up, with Fusaka, I think DevNet 2 is pretty much done at this point. Are there any open points there that we need to discuss? We've pretty much moved on to DevNet 3.
Yeah, maybe one point to mention that we are running different kind of sync test scenarios, and we saw that Lodestar is having issues syncing up, and Nethermind nodes seem to have some issues syncing up multiple times in multiple different days. When we tested, Nethermind was always struggling to sync up in like 2 hours the head of the chain, and Lodestar seemed to get rate limited.
Okay, interesting. And you suspect this is because of the higher blob count?
I think Lodestar is already aware of the issue of getting rate limited. Because they don't do backfilling, I don't see that this would be an issue. I'm not really sure what the issue is on Nethermind's side. I will have to investigate that further.
Okay, thanks. Cool. Then if that's it for DevNet 2, we'll move to DevNet 3, which had Genesis yesterday, about 24 hours ago. And let me see. We haven't quite forked to Fulu yet, but yeah, it says here in just under 4 hours. So yeah, anything to report on DevNet 3 then? I think the fun will begin once we fork to Fulu.
Right. In interop, I have pasted a quick update. The CGC values seem to be all right now on the CL side, and on the ES side, basically the only thing we could check is the ETH config, the new EIP that we have decided to add, and there are some issues there, but I've pinged everyone regarding that.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, then DevNet 3 will fork to Fulu soon. And yeah, I expect then by next Monday with ACDT, we'll have plenty to discuss. Anything else on DevNet 3 for the moment? Or any Fusaka things generally?
We are working on the MEV workflow. Hopefully, either today or tomorrow we can figure it out.
Okay. And that's just using, you wouldn't know if that's using this new V2 endpoint, do you?
Sorry?
There is a spec change in DevNet 3 to have this V2 endpoint. I don't.
Yeah. So that
Okay.
that is there already.
Okay, cool.
Also, I'm not sure which CL will support that on DevNet 3 right after Fulu.
Yeah, it might take some time.
Yeah.
I'm not
So
sure
like
that's implemented.
right now we are still trying to test Electro with the latest branches, and that seems to be breaking at this point also.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Cool. Okay. Then yeah, there's nothing else on Fusaka then. So I did want to kind of just reassert this. We had looked a bit at timelines on ACDE last week, and one way to think about this is having DevNet 3 up this week. Hope things are stable and good. Assuming they are, we can then turn to hardening everything. There was a timeline that basically gave us end of August to do all of that work, and then we could start having release candidates out by the end of August to then think about moving to testnets and then ultimately mainnet. So I kind of just wanted to bring this up again. Just the more times it's repeated, I think the better. So it's in everyone's mind. And I believe the outcome of this last week was, people thought this was perhaps an ambitious timeline, but generally, it wasn't impossible. So let's all try to work under that framework. And okay, if that's it on Fusaka, I guess we're just kind of waiting on DevNet 3 at this point. Yeah, Barnabas?
Yeah, just one more thing that in the next few hours, I will enable a rate limiter on all the full nodes, and we're gonna have basically 100 megabits down and 50 megabits up on every single full node. We have about 70% full nodes and 30% super nodes. Super nodes will not have any rate limiting.
Okay.
And the
Is
super
this a-
nodes have 10 gig connection. So maybe we can rate limit it to 1 gig to be a bit more realistic.
Okay, interesting. And this is a new profile from previous DevNets?
Yeah, previous DevNets didn't have any rate limiting.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll see what that does to things. Hopefully, it doesn't break anything. Okay. So, yeah, just to touch on POTUS's comment here in the chat. Yeah, so when I said release candidates, I mean more like things we go for test nets. Mainnet would, yeah, assuming there's like minor things we see in the test nets, obviously we'd fix those in those releases. Hopefully we can get to, one testnet fork where nothing needs to change. That then becomes the mainnet release. And yeah, per the security sort of procedure that we had, ultimately, yeah, we want 30 days in between that and the actual mainnet date. So that is the rubric we're working under. And again, timelines will be tight, but let's try to make it happen. And maybe just to reiterate, if we do this according to this sketch of a plan, then we can hit Fusaka mainnet before DevConnect, which would be very good. So I think that's all I have to say about that. And if that's the case, then yeah, I think that wraps up Fusaka then. So again, just everyone be watching DevNet 3, and I'm sure once the fork happens, there'll be more to discuss. In that case, we'll turn to Amsterdam, and yeah, it might be a short call today. We'll see. So the main thing here is talking about headliners. So what we had said is essentially, picking one EIP per layer. That is the headliner for the fork. We've moved ahead with the scoping discussions now so that we can kind of parallelize things. Yes, we're working on Fusaka, but also, we can work on Glamstream in parallel, and this should give us a faster sort of shipping velocity overall. So in that case, we're currently in the phase of Glamstream scoping where we need to select a headliner. So we touched on this on the last call. There are some obvious candidates here. Again, I think ePBS is essentially a crowd favorite, at least among core developers. So before we get into that, there were a few updates that people wanted to give on different EIPs. So let's look at those, and then we can turn to discussing selection. So to kick off that, first, I think Maria wanted to give a quick update on shorter slot times. I think, yeah, you're here, Maria.
Yes, I'm here. So I will just quickly share my screen, and then we can start.
Okay.
Let me see. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so I'll try to quickly go through this so we have some time for comments and discussions. So this is just some initial results on slot timings. And I need to highlight that there's no report yet. So this is just early results and early plots, and we do still have a lot to look into, but I think it's already valuable to share on this venue. And just so we know what we are talking about, I just want to highlight exactly what we are measuring here. So the first thing is one of the metrics we are looking at is block arrivals minus the publishing time from relays. So here we are essentially trying to estimate the block propagation, excluding timing games. So we don't assume from 0 seconds, because then again, we would be exposing or taking into consideration the timing games, but we are trying to kind of exclude that part by looking at the difference between time when the block arrived and the published time by the relay. The second thing we are looking at is the attestation arrival minus the same relay publishing time. And so here, this will include both the block propagation, block execution and validation, and then the attestation propagation, okay? Again, excluding the timing games. And then just for the attestation propagation, we will be looking at the attestation arrivals for missed slots, because for those, we know that they only start propagation at second 4. And so we can do the time since second 4, and so we can have a sense of just the attestation propagation, so excluding the block propagation and execution and validation. Okay, so in terms of data sources, we are using data from SHA-2, which is a data set maintained by the Ops team. And they did a recent update on their data set where they did a fork on the Prism client. And this allows us to collect data from the LibP2P layer. And they deployed 3 nodes per location. So we have San Francisco, Amsterdam, Bangalore, and Sydney. And these nodes are only subscribed to 2 subnets or 2 committees. And the reason for this is that we noticed that when we were seeing the data from the older nodes that were subscribed to all committees, their timings were actually much slower than just the ones that were subscribed to just 2 committees. And so this is a much more realistic view on what the normal validator would observe. We also look at block events. And so for the attestations, we only have this LibP2P data set, but for the block events, we also look into an additional data set that SHA-2 has that is contributed by the community. So this allows us to get a much wider view on different locations and also different clients. And also we got the block publishing times by ultrasound relay. So our data is only looking at the blocks that were provided by ultrasound, which is already a sort of, you can say that is a sort of biased sample. But we are working also to get more information from other relays. Okay, so very quickly showing some initial plots. So this is the block propagation for the LibP2P dataset. So it's those 3 nodes per location that are maintained by the Ops team. And here I'm showing the distribution for the different locations and also the 95 percentiles. And so we can see that they are all under 1 second. The 95 percentiles, and Australia is the slowest location. I need to highlight here that these are nodes that have high bandwidth. And so we should most likely see in other nodes that have a lower bandwidth, the timings might be different. And also this is just that sample from blocks that were distributed by the ultrasound relay. So there will be already some skew there. And this is the same metric. So block propagation since the publishing by the relay, but now using the community nodes. So here you see much more wider selection of locations, and we do see some variation between different locations. Some of them are really big outliers, so this could be some issues in the data. And we can see that the 95 percentile is significantly higher. So this is something that we want to investigate more and understand why we have, or what is leading to these slower numbers. But again, I should highlight that this is just a data set that is contributed by the community. We are not collecting any data on who the validators are, nor if this data is collected with high feasibility. So it's more prone to errors than the previous data set. And now we are moving to the attestations. So again, this is the, so here, what I'm showing is for each committee, okay, so for each subnet, I'm looking at when the attestation arrive. So we are receiving attestations, right? We are observing the attestations arriving from that subcommittee. And I'm recording the percentile of attestations. So on the first plot, I'm showing the percentile 65. So you could think of this as like a supermajority within the committee. And then the 95 percentile. So 95% of the attestations that would be shared within that committee arrived at that time. And here we see the full distribution across the various slots and the various committees and nodes. And I'm also showing here the percentiles. So this is the 95 percentiles of the two metrics, which is the metric for the P65, which is the 65 percentile within the committee, and the 95 percentile within the committee. And an interesting thing here is that for the 95 percentile, this is right below what the new proposal for shorter slot times would require. And this is already, you could say, like an extreme metric, because you are taking the 95 percentile of the 95 percentile. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Also, we can see sort of like two modes in the distribution, where we see some attestations kind of arriving much earlier, and then you have a second tail of attestations arriving a bit later. Again, I should highlight this has the same issues as the data set from the blocks that I showed before. So we are seeing these from high bandwidth nodes, and also this is already blocks that are distributed by a relay, so there will be some bias there. Then for the pure attestation slots, here I'm showing the full attestation CDF function. So this is for each node when they are seeing each level, each percentage of attestations within their committee. And here I'm also highlighting the point where we can see sort of a shared distribution. So we do see that some until second 1.5, we see a big majority of attestations coming in. And then after that, the last 10% is actually taking a bit longer. And this is also another point that we want to investigate next and understand what is causing these arrivals. And again, I should highlight, this is still a small sample. And we might see, so the fact that we are using missed slots may actually lead to these numbers looking a bit worse than a normal slot, let's say, because all the attestations are sort of a bigger pressure on the bandwidth side than if there was a normal slot where attestations would come a bit slower throughout the 4-second mark. And so there might be here some delays related to concentration of the attestations. And so just to give you an overview, so going back to that image of the slot that I was showing you, so we do see that for the block propagation, for the nodes that are maintained by ePendops, we do see a good 95 percentile, which would give time to implement this change. For the communities nodes, we are seeing larger percentiles, but I think this is something we also want to investigate more, understand why is that, and also is something we can tweak, because we can this block propagation is something we can control with the block size, and then for the full time that connects propagation, execution, and attestation, we do see that the 95 percentile of the 95 percentile within the committee is perfectly within the proposal. So this is already, well, let's say, like a positive sign. And for just the attestation is I think it's still something we need to analyze a bit further. So first, because we are using the missed slots, there will be some noise there. And also we want to understand what is happening to those last 10% that are coming a bit slower. In terms of next steps, so we will collect more data. Again, this is just preliminary results, so we want to collect more data from other relays. ETH and the Ops team is also working on collecting community data for attestations, so we can have a sense of the difference between analyzing their nodes that are well connected to a more varied sample of nodes, and also gathering bigger samples. In terms of additional analysis, we will look also at blobs because we were just focusing on block arrivals. Also, we want to look at aggregations and then investigate arrivals for locally built blocks and also investigate arrivals for small blocks. So the idea here is to understand how block size and gas use affect both the block propagation and execution times. And finally, also investigate the late arrivals and understand what factors are contributing to that. Maybe it's something that we can fix, or is something that is that depends on the network itself, and it's not something we can change. So it's one thing that we want to look at. So I know this was very fast, so I was trying to keep within time, but if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to go through them. I'm not sure if we have time, but thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Maria. Terrence has had his hand up.
Yeah, I just had a comment and a question. I guess the comment I had was like something I learned from Zatu or just from personal experience is that like when I can speak for Prism, when we send data to Zatu, those data are already validated on the PTP layer, even though like there is an inherent like a small delay there. So it would be worth to make sure what that delay is when we verify something and then send to Zatu. And also the latency, how much like it what basically what is the delay for the transmission as well when the data is sent to Zatu. I think those two have a small delay there. It would be good to have those numbers, I guess. And then the question I had is on the attestation slide, you have P95, and there was something about like 4 seconds, and that is when the block is arrived, right? Versus so yeah. So for this slide, the 4 seconds. So that is calculated when the block is arrived versus the start of the slot, right?
Right. So it's not when the block arrives, is mostly on, so let me just get back to that image, which is, so we are getting the time from when the block is published by the relay, okay? And this is the time that we are discounting. So we essentially are considering the yellow, the pink, and the blue in those 4 seconds. So it is like you are sort of excluding the timing games, but you are still including the block propagation, execution, and validation, and then the attestation propagation.
And that is not a skip slot, and that is the slot that has block of the current slot, right?
Exactly. So for the missed slots is this plot here. For these distributions is just all this, like the sample of slots we had that were relay ultrasound relay blocks.
Okay, but something that's interesting is in Prism, in the next release, we will actually attest timely by default, meaning that we will not wait for the 4 seconds to send attestation. So the number may be slightly better using the Prism for the next release. So something to monitor again, maybe in the next few weeks.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good point.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe even then we would rely on nodes updating. So I think for next time we should stick to getting data from relays. Might be more reliable than assuming everyone updates and people are testing in time.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was unmuted. Yeah, so based on someone correct me if I'm wrong, it's just based on the numbers you had here, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of slack left in the slot. Honestly, it looks like over 6 seconds is just being used for attestation, propagation, aggregation, and propagating the aggregates. So, like, I don't know, this to me would suggest that we couldn't get the slot time down to 6 seconds without some kind of pipelining. But am I interpreting these numbers wrong? Like, how would we do this without
It
pipeline?
doesn't seem to me that is not possible. So in the new proposal, the deadline for the aggregations would be 4.5 seconds. And as I was saying, like this is already a sort of extreme metric because it's a 95 percentile of a 95 percentile. So probably you don't need like the 95, you don't need 95% of the nodes within your committee to see 95% of attestations. Maybe you just need like 4 aggregators to see it. And so, yeah, so this to me is actually like something that seems exciting is like even in an extreme metric, this already seems pretty nice. I think now is a point of collecting more data, making sure that these numbers are correct. And yeah, then look also at the attestation aggregation part that we haven't looked into to make sure that it fits. And also to understand the factors that may be causing delays because there are some things that we could change. So for instance, if we reduce slot times by half, maybe it makes sense to also reduce the gas limit by half. And then this means that both execution and propagation might also reduce a little bit. So yeah, does this make sense or not?
Um, well, are you saying that maybe we could okay, so let's say we cut propagation and execution both in half, and then you're saying we might be able to cut down the attestation aggregation by maybe how much? Like it seems like and then you still have attestation propagation, which I can't see being any faster really. I don't know how you'd make that faster, but
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like for the attestation aggregation, we still need to look into it. So I don't know the timings yet. But for the first part, which is the part that should fit within the 4.5 seconds, it seems to be looking in a good way. We just need to dig a bit deeper there and make sure that the numbers make sense.
okay, so you are still hopeful that we could get it down to 6 seconds then?
From the data I'm seeing, yes. We might discover new things down the line, but so far, yes. Again, I think to me the most compelling thing is like this P95 of the P95 below the 4.5 seconds. I think it's pretty compelling. And then again, we need to look at the aggregation part that we haven't yet. But yeah, I think I'm optimistic.
Barnaby, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess this is more my interpretation and possibly different from Maria's own. But looking at these numbers, I don't think it proves that we can't do 6 seconds, but it maybe says that, yeah, it's first, we need better ways to measure all these things, like to increase our confidence on these numbers. And second, we should also be looking into optimizations as they are available. And I will also say that if we buy the story of restructuring the slot first and then we can easily do 6 seconds, I actually don't think it's still easy. Like even if we do ePBS, putting the attestation deadline, I think the number I saw was 1.5 seconds, means we have 4.5 seconds to do attestation and aggregation. It's a bit better than 6 seconds with the current slot architecture, but it's still, yeah, probably challenging. I share with Maria the optimism that I think the numbers are not like ruling out that it's possible, but I do think we need to do more work on validating them first and then figuring out optimizations to increase our confidence.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you, Maria. And we can go to the next bit here. So that was shorter slot times, which was one of the headliner proposals. And another one that we're all familiar with is ePBS. On this, Christoph and Bruno from Flashbots wanted to give an update on their work. They're calling this particular part of the design the free option problem in ePBS. I assume one of them is on the call.
Both of them, yeah.
Oh, hey.
Hello. Okay. Right. So ePBS free option problem. So what is a free option problem and why should you care? Has to do with basically this this optionality of a winning builder in block building auction to invalidate their block if they're not happy with sort of how the world evolved in the meantime, and there is a difference in time between when they commit to a block and they have a time window after that to invalidate the block if they wish to do so. And they would forgo sort of the gains that they the bids that they made in the PBS auction, but otherwise they would post basically. It's equivalent to posting an empty block. So how is this turning out in reality? So ePBS has two payload timeliness committee deadlines, which you could use both actually to invalidate the block. So you could fail to send the payload in time as a builder. Or what is actually the more valuable option is you could fail to send some blob, and that is the second deadline. And since the entire design is sort of meant as a pipelining sort of architecture where we postpone blobs to the end of the slot, right? That gives you a bunch of time to actually wait for this last deadline for the blobs. Wait whether something happens that is informative to you, and that usually is about trading financial information, and then you could sort of choose to not send a blob. It's about 8 seconds, and so if you want to take away one thing from this presentation, 8 seconds is a lot. 8 seconds is a lot, and that gives you possibly a lot of value to this option. Aside, as I think Otsbertus made this point to me, and I now agree with him philosophically. So it's a problem not about, it's a problem of ePBS, but it's more like the feature of pipelining, right? So the fact that you give ample room for propagation of blobs, and so you have those different timelines. So the fact that you can basically trigger invalidation of the block by failing to submit a blob, right? And that would probably be true for sort of other designs that would have this pipelining feature. Okay, so what we did in the thing, and that is ongoing research, but so we want to do more on that, but we tried to figure out how valuable this option is. So, and sort of the TLDR is, okay, probably very valuable in some sense, and it creates a bad form of MEV, right? So you basically create a form of MEV where if you exploit the MEV, in some cases you produce empty blocks, and that has a negative externality on everybody else who wanted to put their transactions in the block. So it's potentially substantial. It is also, the value of the option is increasing in volatility and increasing in liquidity on chain. So what does it mean in plain English? So increasing in volatility means that sort of the option is triggered asymmetrically. So there might be some days where a lot of things happen in the world, and then basically you have a lot of empty blocks suddenly in these days because there's a lot of volatility. Some days nothing important happens, and so you observe it less frequently. And increasing in liquidity means if Ethereum is able to attract a lot of financial activity, more so than it currently does, actually the problem becomes worse, right? So it becomes worse with scaling financial activity. And both, volatility is increasing in the time window as well, and that is sort of the reason why. The longer you have the pre-option window, the worse it becomes. And well, as I said, the punchline is 8 seconds is probably bad. And actually bad, why? Because it's sort of the mental model that you could have is sort of this length of this free option value relative to the slot length. That matters, right? If sort of the free option window is sort of here it's 3/4 of the slot length, that is a lot, right? It would be less of a problem if it would be 1/2. It would be less of a problem if it would be, I don't know, 1/3. The point is sort of it doesn't disappear when you make slots shorter, if sort of the relative fractions remain the same. Okay, so that's the thing. We try to do a bit of like mix of theoretical analysis and empirical analysis. That is sort of very preliminary. We want to do it because empirical analysis is mostly on Binance data. So because on-chain trading data is messy, we want to extend it to that. But I can tell you what is going on with that. We also have some potential mitigations that I think Bruno wants to tell you about. One other sort of interesting punchline is, so I think for me at least it's an interesting punchline. So the problem also becomes worse if we make on-chain trading better in some sense, right? If we reduce the MEV on-chain per unit of liquidity deployed on-chain, so if sort of we make the trading leak less MEV, right? We solve sandwiching, or we solve this problem of basically stale liquidity being placed at stale prices, right? To better AMM design. So if we make the on-chain trading experience better, sort of weirdly the option becomes more attractive. And that is basically because you give up, if you exercise the option, you give up on MEV, right? In a time window, in order to exercise the option, right? So you give up sort of the block values that you would otherwise have captured, or part of the block value. That's one way of thinking about it. Okay, that's a TLDR. I want to explain it with a mental model of poker that was taken, this is from ECC Call. So there was a casino which was conveniently located next to the convention center for ECC. So here's one mental model that you could have. So suppose you would play roulette, right? Usually that's not a good idea because you lose. But now you have the options that you can sort of revert the spin of the roulette wheel if you don't like the outcome, right? So that's the option, the kind of option that you would have, right? So you spin the roulette wheel and then it's black and you bet on red, then you revert it. Suppose you have that option, right? So what is the value of that option? And basically it depends on the maximal bet you can take in the casino. So whatever allows you the casino allows you to bet on the roulette wheel, that is sort of the value of the option, right? Half of that is the value of the option. Okay, so you can take and that bounce the value of that option. That sort of the interesting thing is if you translate it into finance, is basically the option scales with liquidity, right? So the more liquidity you can place in the market, there is in the market, so that you can place larger bets in the market, the worse the option problem becomes. And we looked into Binance data, as I said. So we looked into what happens, for example, if you trade 1 million notional on Binance in 8 seconds intervals, and you would have the option to revert the trade if you don't like the outcome. So that is a return distribution. So you get somewhere between 1,000 and a -1,000 on those bets, right? Betting 1 million on Ethereum going up or down. So it's much lower AV per unit of liquidity than in the casino, right? There it's a coin flip, basically. So you get 50% in the casino, but here in Binance, because the price of ETH doesn't move that much, it moves maybe 1 basis point per 8 seconds approximately. So you get on a 1 million bet size, you get about between 1,000 and -1,000, and on average you get what was it, 200, 300, something like this. But the interesting thing is, with the option, you can basically eliminate the bad cases, right? So you don't get the -1,000, you don't get the -500, you don't get the -250, you only get everything to the right of 0. Or if you want to bet on ETH going down, it's sort of almost symmetric. You can also get the left-hand side and then multiply by -1. So that's sort of, Binance is a casino just with a lower, return on each spin, but and the amount of liquidity that you can bet is basically how much you should value the option. Okay. Then we looked into how would that look like if we would have Binance level liquidity on ETH-USDC pair, and then you get something like this. So you get upward sloping curve. So the longest sort of this option window is, the more value that you can make. So the right-hand side curve, I think, is more interesting. So that's the absolute value of the return. So you get half of that, right? If it's a coin flip, whether ETH goes up or down, right? And then you see with 8 seconds, for example, it's a bit above 200, you get half of that, so you get $118 per spin on average on Binance. That's 1.2 million per day, approximately 1.3 million. Okay, so that's the order of magnitude. If you would have Binance size liquidity on Ethereum L1, which you don't have, right? I think it's off by a factor 10 or whatever. But then also that is only one pair, right? So you can also, I mean, if you have this option, you can trade many roulette wheels at the same time, right? You can bet on ETH, you can bet on Bitcoin, you can bet on everything. You have many correlated bets, right? So you can pump it up. So the mental model that you should have is, right, everything that you can trade basically with good liquidity, where you have very low slippage, put a bet in there, and then take the chance. And if you lose out on the value, if it's the other way, then you can revert your trade, right? And that gives you this sort of magnitude of gains, which I think is substantial. So in theory, value is higher if there's more liquidity, right? I think that is clear. So if I can trade not only 1 million notional on Binance with almost 0 slippage, but 2 million notional with almost 0 slippage, then I just double my gains, right? In Ethereum world, if you could, we attract twice as much liquidity, you make this problem maybe. So the value of the option you make double, but then you also maybe increase the cost of exercising the option, right? So it's a mixed bag, but I would say if you increase liquidity directionally, it would increase the problem, and it's a function of volatility, right? So if you can trade meme coins, maybe you get lower liquidity on those, but get per spin you get more, right? You can bet less on the roulette wheel, but you get more per spin. Right, and that scales it as well. One sort of very crude way of approximating how bad the problem is, you could say, okay, this free option gives you about half of the arbitrage that a builder could make if he would be able to place their bet top of block, their order top of block over 8-second slot time blocks in this counterfactual world. So you can get about half of the value, not quite half of the value, but approximately half of that value. And then that gives you a sort of a very crude way of approximating it. It would look. Don't take the takeaway of this slide is not don't take those probabilities literally, but I mean. Philosophically, those are the kind of effects that you should expect, right? So you have increasing probability of option exercise if you have increasing exercise window, right? And that is basically if you do it with this heuristic that you say, okay, you can capture approximately half of the arbitrage gains that you could capture in the conventional MEV way. You can capture with the option then you get this kind of comparative statics. On the other hand, this is normally distributed returns. So if they're fat tails, actually this becomes more extreme, right? So you get higher probabilities. And then the two curves tell you, okay, it makes a difference whether actually sort of the MEV scales linearly with time, probably less than linearly with slot time, or it probably scales a bit more than square root block time. But you get substantial probabilities with this napkin math model, right? And sort of the other thing to highlight, this is of course a very stupid, it's a very straightforward and stupid strategy, right? You just take a bet, and then if the bet doesn't turn out well, you basically exercise the option. So you could run more sophisticated strategies, probably make more, but sort of you get these numbers, right? So you get, I don't know, anywhere between 5 and 10% exercise probability on these things, right? So we would need to calibrate this more with actual data. Another data point, which is more like anecdotal. So we also ask a searcher from SCP, I mean, how he would think about this option. He says, okay, that's very valuable. You could expect at least 10% of blocks where this option is exercised, assuming, right, all of these, assuming away all of builders builders of course want to be well behaved, right? They might not exercise that option because of social slashing reason, or because they are blocklisted by validators if they do that so often. But assuming away all of those things, north of 10% probability of exercising option when we have this kind of 8 seconds option time window. So it's substantial. We should be aware of that. And it scales very badly, right? If Ethereum becomes more successful, the problem gets worse. Okay, Bruno, do you want to talk a bit about potential solutions?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, potential solutions. I mean, the first one.
Bruno, sorry, just one sort of orchestration point. Let's try to move through these slides faster rather than slower.
Sorry, what?
Let's just try to get through these slides so we can get to other things on the agenda today.
Okay, essentially, yeah, we have 3 sets of solutions. So slashing, shortening the free option window, and blocklisting. I think the most reasonable one is shortening free option window, but that could have other effects that we don't know of. Additional slashing, of course, essentially like can increase the barriers of entries, and so that's not good, but also like will decrease the option value, and of course also the probability of exercising it. Also, we think like blocklisting is not the right solution because, yeah, we want a permissionless builder market, and either we will have civils or we will make it permissioned when we are blocklisting, because we think these opportunities will be exercised more by solo searchers building blocks and actually like block builders that try to acquire order flow. And then there is like a potential 4th solution that we should be thinking more about. It is essentially making blobs totally separated objects from transactions, and essentially having completely independent inclusion and fee markets process. So that could be some of the ideas. I don't know if we have more time.
Were there more slides? Yeah, it seems like it stopped. Yeah, in that case, I guess, are there maybe 1 or 2 follow-up questions? There are a lot of conversation in the chat. It's going to be hard to summarize them all. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I would say with regard to the like increasing the penalty, like the only that seems like a fine solution, but the worry that we would have here is that people go and they try to do this with solo staking and off-chain relays, and if that was happen, then we would have to impose this on solo stakers, and that would only impact like solo staking, self-building validators. But they would only get that penalty in like an unfair way if basically their node dies between publishing the beacon block and the execution payload, and we could presumably mitigate that by allowing them to publish the execution payload first. They don't have to worry about the blobs since they're self-building and they're already building publicly available blobs anyway. So yeah, that was just a nuance I wanted to point out, that we could increase this penalty and we could do things to try to make it so that no self-building solo staker would suffer this that was honest. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, maybe just to summarize, there's this notion of the free option problem. There are some solutions. It sounds like it might take a little more work to figure out the right way to frame 7732, which is the ePBS EIP, to mitigate them. But it seems like there are some potential paths there. Cool. Let's see. One other point on this EAP, Daplion had a post that was relevant. Let's see, is he on the call? I think, oh yeah, there you are. I don't know if you'd like to say anything, Daplion. If not, I can just grab a link to your post.
Yeah, I agree with the slot restructuring part for the sake of scaling, and I was just questioning the need to do the trustless payment. So at least I wanted to add the option to the fork planning and to everyone that if we want to, we can do EIP 7732 without the trustless payment, and I haven't found any obstacle to that path.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just responding in the chat. Just around like potential paths for mitigation of the free option problem. I mean, it sounds like there's, for example, you could penalize the builder for not revealing something like this. Yeah, rather than going further into that, let's just leave that alone for now. Okay, so if there were no other questions about that for the moment, one other thing that came up, so Christine Kim had a community space yesterday, and she had some input from different community members. I also am not sure if she's on the call, but let me grab a link to her message. It was on the Awkward Devs channel, so you probably saw it. But in short, let me just give a summary. So, sorry, I lost the tab. Okay. Yeah, support for some sort of pipelining. ePBS could be a solution here. Another support for 6-second slots, just to improve UX. And otherwise, yeah, those are the main things there. So just consider that as +1s for these proposals from the community. There were some shout outs to Forecast, and yeah, Christine will continue this process just to get input from different community members. So I did want to bring that up. And from there, okay. So I think the way to proceed here, yeah, and maybe we'll need to have a conversation about this. However, my read is given, yeah, different community inputs that we've gotten, both core developer sentiment and also the relative progress of R&D on these different proposals. It seems like ePBS is sort of the leading headliner candidate right now. The way I propose to proceed is that we essentially like conditionally acknowledge this on today's call. That then can be an input to ACDE next week. And the reason we want to do that is because the headliners we pick here might also impact the headliners they pick on the EL side. So we kind of have this circular dependency, and seems like this is the right path forward. Does that sound okay to everyone? And maybe then just to like round out the timing, say we do this now, given sort of another conditional act from ACDE next week, then we can go ahead and make the headliner decision on the next ACDC in 2 weeks. All right, just ask, would we SFI ePBS? Let's see. I'd want to think if we want to CFI versus SFI just process wise, but essentially, yeah, like we would say that this would be the headliner selection for Amsterdam on the CL side. Oscar asked a question, would we explore builder penalties? So yeah, at least the way I see this shaping up is that the selection for this process today and say over next call would just be saying this is what we intend to do. I think then that lets people focus very precisely on just 7732. And there's a number of open questions there around, yeah, things we want to improve or fix. I think the IP can still evolve, but this is just, again, narrowing the scope. Rather than having this entire set of VIPs, we can then move to focus on just this one. Mark?
I'll let POTUS go first, actually.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment because I wrote it like 3 times on the chat. If you go on the computations of the free option problem, lowering the size relative to the slot actually minimizes this issue. Like what it was like it appears in a percentage of slots that this searcher builder would actually find it beneficial to exercise the option. Reduces that dramatically if you make this size window minimal. And it's not a feature of the commit reveal process of ePBS, but it is a feature of the difference between the payload deadline and the blob deadline. If you make those too early, very early enough, so that the builder only has time to just reveal immediately as it receives the block, this problem disappears from ePBS. Of course, at the cost of scaling, which is the essential trade-off here. The deadlines for blobs being late is as late as we want is what we want on anything. This will happen on APS. This will happen on any system that has a different deadline for execution and data. And we want these different deadlines for execution and data because we need the end of the slot to execute the block or to prove the block in ZK. And we don't need this for broadcasting the data. So that's what I meant. I mean, there's a way of making this disappear according to the computations themselves of Christoph's and company, which is just put those 2 deadlines together and put them as immediately after the attestation deadline. This makes the problem disappear, but then it also makes the scaling disappear. And this is the kind of things that we need to think about.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was next. Yeah. And I would say, like, maybe more precisely, it doesn't make the scaling disappear because you still have the ability to execute after the things are propagated. But we can't scale as much as we could, and wanted to point out that we are intending to shorten slots as soon as we can as well. And so if you actually shorten the slot, then I mean, it sounds like the problem gets not less or harder to pull off or not as bad if you have a smaller deadline. So like if we are shortening the slots later, then we're going to make this attack harder. But as was pointed out, like if things like liquidity on Ethereum go up, this could be an issue. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to point out that we are naturally going to lower these deadlines. And if this is such a problem in Amsterdam, we could set the PTC deadline quite early to mitigate it. And then later, when we shorten the slots, it won't have, we'll still get a lot of these scaling benefits.
Tancred.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly check, like you mentioned that both from community and core devs, like you see the most support for ePBS. I mean, I definitely see the core devs part, but I don't see the community part. I think like in most of what I've seen from the community clearly has 6-second slots ahead of ePBS. Can you clarify that, where this impression comes from?
Yeah, so this is where it's kind of tricky. Mainly just different conversations, even on like Twitter that I've seen. So something that would help here is having like, yeah, more like, I don't know if official is the right word, but having like more written records that are easier to like index would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, we do have that, right? Like, I mean, there were the, I don't know who made this, like the headliner tier list, and I think like I saw in the majority slot times being at the top.
I saw something different. So, yeah, I think the way to proceed then would just be to, again, conditionally say ePBS looks like the favorite today. We can take more time, even, as of next ACD or even the next ACDC call, we can revisit that and make another assessment.
Okay, I mean, I would object to that based on like saying that this is the community opinion. This is not what I see.
Okay. Okay, I will take a look, try to compile some stuff, and yeah, if that's not the case, then definitely I'll bring this up and we will incorporate that. Okay, there's a lot of commentary in the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to speak up, but essentially, I think the next point then, there was a process suggestion here from Tim. So I was trying to basically say like, give some positive signal of narrowing the scope, which again, in my assessment is ePBS right now. One way we could do that is actually CFI it today, and then move to SFI on the next call. I mean, one thing with that is, I think the CFI gives people more confidence to be more fine-grained with the different issues we see. There could be some problem where it's like, oh, actually, this is a bigger problem than we thought. For example, more work on this reoption problem. Then it would be kind of weird, I think, to CFI or like essentially undo the SFI. So again, if people want to do one or the other, we can. It feels like we're a bit early to make that exact call today. I don't know if you had more thoughts on that, Tim.
Yeah, I was literally just typing in the chat. One other option today is like, it seems pretty apparent that the three main CL headliners that are like being considered are ePBS, 6-second slot times, and Fossil. So we could also just like say that we CFI these three, and then yeah, on the next call we're sort of making a decision. And if we went down that path, it might be worth spending some time today getting some insight from Cortez on like what they would like to see from these other proposals, especially given that like there's a strong bias, at least on the Cortez side, towards moving forward with ePBS. Like, are there things that would change their mind, and what are those? So we get basically 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks to address those things.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess a couple of things. So ePBS is, I think, relatively large in scope. Then from there, I personally would have concerns about also doing Fossil, but I think that's a conversation we should have. 6-second slots, yeah, is interesting. And again, I'd love to hear any opinions from people here today. My read is that, it's a compelling proposal, but the research and development's like actually pretty early. But then, yeah, to Tim's point, if any core dev would like to chime in here and say what would help change your mind, that would be really useful, because then we can go and do that work and bring it back to the next, set of calls. So does anyone have like a concrete set of data or analysis they'd like to see on 6-second slots? Curtis?
Preston, I don't think he's here. I think he's busy. So I'll speak for him. I asked him how he's doing. Hopefully he's gonna correct me if I said something wrong here. But Preston already has a proof of concept of a Prism node that actually changes in a fork, and it manages to run even in kurtosis up to 1 second block, of course, locally. So the hard part of changing the slot duration is done. But of course, it's not. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's doable. He did it in a couple of months, I think. And still, a lot of things are missing. A lot of things are broken, like reorging late blocks. A bunch of things that are like tied to the engine API are broken, or he has still some to-dos in the list. But I think the major blocker for that PR is the fact that it's not even specified. We are going to need to touch issuance, and I mean, he hasn't even looked into how hard that part would even be. We need to touch like at least the base reward, make sure that just scaling the base reward is enough. And it's not really clear how invasive that change would be on top of the already working branch from Preston. But Prism has a prototype, and I think we can easily add it later on a later fork.
Great, Ben.
So the vibe I get is that both slot restructuring and shorter slots are desirable, and it's more of a sequencing question, which goes first. So my question for ePBS is, if that goes first, what would be the slot time target? As in, if we can do if it's possible to do 6 seconds now.
I think the numbers we got
ePBS.
today of attestations are the bottleneck. I think it's probably not have to do with ePBS itself. We need to figure out what to do with attestations and aggregation. I was counting with 1 second to get most attestations, and today we heard 4 seconds. So that changes dramatically my view of what the shortest slot can be. I mean, until we get those numbers correct, it's strange.
4 seconds is block propagation execution plus attestation. Just so that you don't like misunderstand that.
I thought it was the P95 to get attestations from committee 0 and 1, and it was P95 was 4100. Maria was here. Can you?
Yeah, it is counted since the block was published by the relay. So it does include block propagation, execution, and validation, and then the attestations itself. So it's like if you were to do the 6 second slot, you would have the deadline.
I need to add
for that.
Yeah, so I need kind of hard. Yeah, so then it's kind of hard to measure. So in ePBS, we were hoping to do this because the block propagation will become much shorter. So that number kind of is irrelevant for ePBS because the block in ePBS would be very, very small. It's only the consensus block and not the payload.
Yeah, so would the slot time target be even shorter after ePBS is my question, or would it be the same as 6? Does it get us anything other than safety?
I think the answer to that question is very simple. Whatever we do, we want to be in a situation in which the full slot is used, entire slot is used. And the minimum size of the slot that we can actually use is determined by broadcast and not by how you pipeline it. So I would suspect that any system more or less arrives to about the same kind of minimal slot time.
Right, and I think like my argument would be that currently a lot of things are not very well optimized because we did have so much slack in the slot. We had to just allow 4 seconds for propagation, and we will learn a lot from doing the work on reducing slot times, and it will also improve how informed our choices will be on pipelining. And it's better to do it when fully understanding what like the hardest constraints are, rather than doing it now with not even knowing exactly. Like,
we do know that the hardest constraint is bandwidth.
Well, I mean, right now there's something else, right? For example, we see that 10% of the attestations somehow arrive very slowly. I mean, I think like this is like something that we really need to investigate what is happening there. There's something strange there when like 90% arrive very quickly, and then there's like a slow long tail. Like what's happening there? Like stuff like that is really important to analyze. And like, is it a hard constraint? Is this because some validators are in the middle of nowhere and really slow, and we really want to allow that time? Like all these things are important questions, I think. or is it just random and it's like something we can improve by having some improvement in the pub subs? Like, I don't know. Like, this is, yeah. This is really important to investigate. And I feel like it's also, it helps like actually working on reducing the slot time to actually get there, because otherwise we will never have the actual full pressure to like optimize these things as much as we can. And I think it will allow us to make better choices on pipelining.
Yeah, Fotis.
I think it's actually the opposite. I mean, the attestation. So for the current slot time, attestation, propagation, aggregation, all of these things are completely irrelevant for ePBS. They happen in the background while you're doing useful stuff like propagating the block and executing it. So how many attestations are coming late or not doesn't change at all the pipelining benefits of ePBS. While they do change how short the slot we can actually make. So that's more of a reason to actually choose some pipelining now, deliver pipelining, and then adjust the timing so that they are actually possible.
Okay, there are a number of comments in the chat around, supporting these investigations. I would highlight that this will take time. And if we want to make a call on Amsterdam in, say, the next couple weeks, it might be hard to get that data, which, again, is just another input to consider. So, okay, I think to move forward then, probably what's best today, Tim's suggestion here was to CFI 6-second slots, ePBS, and fossil, and essentially then just take this to the next call. This helps reduce the scope of what the CL is thinking about in terms of Amsterdam headliners. That will then help refine the EL headliners, and presumably then it'd be nice to make a call on the actual headliner on the next ACDC. So that's how I would propose to move forward. In the meantime, there were some comments around like, what does it actually mean to get community input? I think trying to have like a canonical source of truth would be good, and I'd propose ETH magicians for this. There have been comments around Twitter and these forecast polls and everything. I think if EIP champions would like to, even just copying that, into an ETH magicians post just to put it in one place would be useful. Because I think some of what we're seeing right now is different people are seeing different data, and it leads to split views, which is tricky to navigate. So I think we do that today. CFI those 3 EIPs, with the idea being that one of them will be the CL headliner, then do what we can to then, again, really refine this notion of community input to help make the decision on the next call. So the 3 EIPs, 7732 with ePBS. I think it's 7886 for just the 6-second slots, and I forget the fossil number. $7,805. Thank you. I might add the number off on 6-second slots as well.
Right. 7886 was still in execution.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting them mixed up. I can go find the 6-second slots number unless someone has it. Is it 7782? That's what came up. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Barnaby. So either way, I'll get that sorted in the summary and make that clear. And from there, I think we're good on the Amsterdam conversation for right now. In that case, we will turn to the last agenda item here. There was a spec question from Eton. Again, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but I think that'd be helpful for context. Oh yeah, would you like to ask this question you had?
Right now, I have a problem when I want to get my specs for Pureth into the consensus specs repo. because I need a couple extra SSE types. Namely, that's like the lists and the progressive containers. The problem is because the SSE specs are part of consensus specs repo, but there is no way to make like a fork specific type there because there is only like a master spec there. Like the other infrastructure where it's like where you can make like a features folder and create your own folder there and put all the pre-release stuff there. It doesn't work for the SSE specs. There is a precedent with the union, which is also a type that is not used by Ethereum itself. It's only used by Portal Network, and that one is also there. So I made a PR to make it like similar, where I add my type and just put like a comment, hey, this is from this EIP, it's currently unused, just to get it in there at the tests to unblock me. And I was wondering if that's fine. Justin just pasted the PR there in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, one comment here, we do have a precedent here with other SSE features from a long time ago, like unions is one. So yeah, this wouldn't be anything super new. I guess the question then is, would anyone have problems with this being in the spec? Again, it would be clearly labeled that it's essentially a placeholder.
Yeah, and it adds extra test folders to consensus spec tests that can be ignored because it's unused, right?
Right. So if no one disagrees sort of at a high level, I think we can take this from, we can take the conversation to the PR. And yeah, there might be ways to restructure things that make more sense. Barnabas has this comment here about handling feature forks better. And yeah, I agree. It would be nice to have a clear way to handle this in the actual artifact. But I think that's something we can sort out on the PR. Okay, yeah, it seems like no disagreements in principle. So yeah, Yitang will, Justin and I can work with you on that PR. Okay. Let me do one more check, but I think that's all we had on the agenda today. And yep, so yeah, we can wrap up a little bit early unless someone else has any closing comments. Okay. Well, then I'll see you all next week on ACDE. We'll continue the Amsterdam discussion there. And hopefully by then we'll also have more data on how DevNet 3 is going with Fusaka, so we can keep that moving as well. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Bye.